Okay, so I think we're about ready to begin. We might have a couple of more groups joining us within the next few minutes, but I think we can go ahead and get started. First off, just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Francisco. I am with VCS Software, and we are here this morning to begin our schedule build sessions. Now, your schedule builds are divided into 7 online classes, of which you may have already signed up for over the next week or two. Now, these online schedule builds are designed to help you focus on specific topics like adding employees, building schedules, creating day off and overtime reasons that your people will need whenever they log on to the system to request either one of those things. And so each class is scheduled for approximately an hour and a half, of which there will be approximately 1 hour of instruction time, and a little extra time is built into that for questions and answers, as well as just some workshop time. So if you would like to load up the program on your side and actually start building the items that we're discussing, you will have the opportunity to do that. Now, I also wanted to point out that besides the 7 online build sessions, you also have access to what we call help out sessions. So those help outs you can register for on the same page that you use to register for the individual classes. And we post help out sessions every week so that you can choose the date and a time that fits best with your schedule. And so as you are building your system, if you run into any issues, whether it's building a schedule, adding your employees, basically if you hit a brick wall, you can sign up for those help out sessions. Those are 45 minutes in length. They are one-on-one, and they allow us to focus on your department and your specific needs. So I would encourage you, as you attend these online builds, if you run into any problems, sign up for those help out sessions. And again, we're posting those on a weekly basis. They're available just about every day, and we have morning and afternoon sessions available. Now, your 7 online build sessions are what we call community learning sessions. And in other words, there's going to possibly be several departments sitting in on any given session. So those help outs, going back to those can be useful so that if your department is doing things in a slightly different way or unique way, those help out sessions allow us to focus on, again, your department's specific needs. Now, for each of the online build sessions, once you have registered for them, you will have received a document. It will be included in the email confirmation for any class that you sign up for. And that document will include screenshots and instructions, basically covering everything that we cover during each session. So that's a great training aid. You can, of course, print those out before the class, or you can print them out afterwards. In addition to that document, within the confirmation email you receive after the class has ended, you will see a link that will allow you to download the document again, so you'll have access to the document when you register, as well as after the class has ended. And in that same link, you will see access to the recording of each class. So if you ever need to revisit a particular screen that we covered, just so you feel comfortable on how to use it, you will have access to that video. Now, we will continue using the Go-To training program for each of these build sessions. And you'll notice at the very bottom of that Go-To training control panel, there's an option to chat with me. So if you need to send me a question or a comment, you're free to use that. Again, it's at the very bottom of the Go-To training control panel. And you're going to enter the question where it says type message here. And then just below that, before you click on the send button, you can choose to share your question with anyone else that's attending that class, or you can send that question to me privately. Now, depending on how many are attending any particular class, we may need to mute the microphones. So as of this moment, you have dialed in either by phone or you might have a live mic attached to your computer. Normally, if it's a very small amount of attendees, we'll keep the mics open. And we'll pause in between screens to take any questions that you might have. But in the event that we just have too many attendees, if there is excessive noise coming from any of the microphones, we may just need to temporarily mute them. So, if you try speaking to us and we can't hear you, it's because we may have had to have muted the mics. But you can always use the chat option under Go-To training if you need to ask us anything. Now, between each screen, we're going to take a short pause. We're going to ask questions. Please, make use of that time. Don't be shy, especially if we have multiple groups in attendance. Chances are, if you have a question about a particular screen, someone else probably has the same question. So please feel free to come forward with any questions you might have. Now, at the end of your 7 online sessions, you should have a working schedule. You're going to have all of your employees assigned to schedules. You're going to have day off and overtime reasons. You're going to have a web portal where your employees can log on to and view their schedules and request time off and overtime. And at that point, you're ready to take the next step and sign up for your basic and supervisor training classes. It is during those classes where we're going to teach you how to log on, how to view schedules, how to perform scheduling functions. And at that point, you can choose to go live within your department. Now, there's a third group of classes that we provide on an ongoing basis, and those are called Advanced Setup and Training. Within Advanced Setup and Training, you're going to be able to sign up for payroll classes, classes on extra duty billing. You're also going to be able to sign up for classes that will teach you how to automate certain functions within the system. So the classes that you're going to be attending over the next week or two are just going to focus on the basic build. Then you're going to move on to your training classes, and then you'll move on to those advanced setup and training classes. Now, you should have received access to what we call Basecamp. Basecamp is a project management tool that we provide to you so that you can track your progress throughout the implementation of this system. I would encourage you to use that tool. Within that tool, you'll be able to mark off the various steps that you have completed, and it also gives you an idea of how far along you are in the overall process. Now we're just about ready to get started. Just a few more items about the go-to training. The control panel is probably being displayed on the far right portion of your screen. Just to the left of that, there's a tab sticking out with an orange button with a white arrow at the very top. That will allow you to hide the controls so that you can see my entire screen. If you were to do that, you should be able to see the username and password field on the top right portion. Now you can click on that orange button again to make the go-to training control panel reappear, in case, for instance, you wanted to use the chat option. Otherwise, I would recommend that you just keep that hidden so that you can see my complete screen. Now, throughout the 7 build sessions, we're going to build everything through the desktop application, which is what I currently have loaded up on my desktop. So on your workstation, you should see an icon that looks like mine here with the V. And when you click on that, it will bring up the desktop app. And the desktop application is what you're going to use not only to build your system, but this will also be the main interface for all of your administrators. So anyone who is responsible for adding employees, building schedules, processing payroll, will be performing those functions through the desktop application. While most of your basic users and supervisory level users will be utilizing our web portal for their day-to-day scheduling needs. Now, to log on to the desktop application, we're going to use the generic administrative account. This is already built into your system. The username is SECADM. That also happens to be your password. Anyone who is responsible over the next few weeks of completing any data entry tasks will log on with this username and password. You can have multiple people logged on with this account at one time. So if you need to delegate out the work, that's perfectly fine. Everyone can log on to the same application from their individual workstations with the same credentials and essentially update the same database. So let's click on Sign In. And the first time you sign in, you're going to see a blank dashboard view that will be perfectly normal. And for most of your schedule build sessions, we're going to focus on the administration drop-down menu. This is where a good portion of your system will be built from. This is where we will create employees, where we will create time off and overtime reasons. Further down the line, this is where you're going to set up your payroll functions. All of that will be controlled under the administration drop-down menu. Now, for today's class, we're going to focus on a handful of items. Number one, we're going to set up some department-wide settings. We're then going to create titles or ranks. We're going to then create groups or departments. And for some of you, that might also cover squads. So if in your particular department you have an administrative department, a detective bureau, a police department, those would all fall under groups. And finally, this morning, we're going to learn how to enter our employees. So let's get started. Under the Administration drop-down menu, we're going to select Company Center, and we're going to choose Application Control. Now, we're going to apply some system-wide settings. It's going to affect how really everyone uses the system. Now, we're not going to look at every single checkbox or drop-down menu. We're only going to focus on the items that we need in order to complete the basic schedule build. So starting with the very top, you're going to set your current schedule dates. Now, for most of you, this will be based on a calendar year, similar to what I have, January 1st to December 31st of 2016. Now, for those that operate off of a fiscal period, you can change that. Let's say from July 1st, 2016 to June 30th of 2017. Now, your current schedule dates are going to affect some of your reporting capabilities later on. So whether you're generating a time off or overtime activity report, it will assume that you want to see the information based on this calendar period. We're going to skip over to the Other Controls section, and we're going to take a look at some of the VCS's recommended settings. The first one being allow changes to future approved days off. This is a supervisory level setting, and it means anyone with supervisory access will be able to modify time off entries that are scheduled out in the future. And this might be handy if for some reason someone requested a day off and now a supervisor has to go in and modify that entry for whichever reason. Next, we're going to hide pay rate on the employee statistical report. And all that means is that we're just hiding pay rate information in general from anyone who is not an administrator. Next, show jobs on daily schedule means that if an employee is assigned to a particular job during the course of their work shift, and for some of you that might be a physical location where they're assigned, or it might be a particular work status that they are working under, you may want to see that information posted on the daily schedule. And in other words, it may just not be good enough to know that someone is working 7 to 3 on a particular day. We may want to know where they're stationed or what they're doing during the course of that particular shift. That's what we would call a job. And that information can be displayed in a number of places, including our daily schedules. Over to the right, we're going to mark Always Email Receipt. And this means that whenever the schedule changes in any way, we will send an email to the person who is affected by that change. Our system will send out emails for time off and overtime entries, So if I was a basic user and I requested a day off, I should receive an email as a confirmation that my request went through. Once my request has been approved, I should receive another email letting me know that it's been approved. I would also receive emails if I was assigned to a training class or an extra duty job. If I've been reassigned to another type of schedule, whether it's for a single day or permanently, again, I should receive email notifications because those are all things that are occurring outside of the base schedule. Next, show denied days is marked, and this just means that if anyone requests time off through the system and the time off is denied, that information will be displayed on the schedule. And you could decide that information is helpful, especially to supervisors. Next up, hide Social Security number. What that actually means is that we are removing that field from the employee profile screen. Now, the employee profile screen is going to be the last one that we look at today. And there's several different fields we're going to have to complete whenever we add a new employee. And this is just stating that we're going to hide that field, that we do not want to collect Social Security numbers for each individual. Now, those are the VCS's recommended settings. However, later on, you may choose to come back to this screen and use some of the other functions that we offer. And I just wanted to point out two of these. You'll notice one called Approved Time Off if no staffing shortage. Well, at some point, you will be able to define what your minimum staffing requirements are. And if you choose, you can have the system automatically approve time off for any requests that will not cause a staffing shortage. A little further down, we have deny time off if staffing shortage. If I'm requesting a day off on a particular shift that's already operating at its minimum staffing levels, you can choose to have the system automatically deny that time off. Now, anyone with supervisory or administrative privileges will be able to override that. Again, you may choose to come back and turn some of these settings on. Our recommendation is that at least initially, we have supervisors view all time off entries and approve them. And then later on, you can always choose to turn that function on once you feel comfortable with everything else you need to learn within the system. Let's move on to the next section here, away from the checkboxes, and there's a field here labeled Reciprocate Restriction. Now, you have two choices here, and they deal with how you manage schedule switches within your department. And a reciprocate is just a fancy word for schedule switches. So your choices are to enter a double P, which means schedule switches must occur within the same pay period. So if you have individuals working for one another, if I'm going to work for one person one day and they're going to work for me on another day, those dates may have to fall within the same pay period. If so, enter a double P into that field. Your other option is to enter a 0. That means there are no restrictions. Employees can request switches with one another for pretty much any date, and then it becomes really the supervisor's responsibility to view the switch requests and to approve them based on whatever your department rules might be. We're going to skip standard hour to use for daily rate calculation. It should be set to 0. If it's not, you can go ahead and enter that in. This is actually a payroll function, and this is not going to be the last time we see something that is payroll related during the schedule build. Now, we are not going to address these fields just yet. We're going to wait until we've actually gone through your advanced setup and training classes, and then we may have to go back and, depending on your department's needs, apply some of these changes. Okay. So for now, we're going to leave that set to 0. And under first day of the work week, you're going to choose whether you consider that to be a Sunday or a Monday. In my department, my test department here, I'll have that set to Monday. Over to the right, you're going to choose your time zone. We're based out of New Jersey, so I'll go ahead and select Eastern Time. And then below, you're going to choose what time format you'd like to use. Are you going to use the military 24-hour format, or are you going to use standard AM and PM? For my department here, I'll set that to military. And once I'm done, I'll click on the Save button up top. Okay, we're going to take a look at one more screen before I take a pause for any questions. So let's close out of our application control screen. And we're going to move over to General Setup. And very simply, you're going to enter your department name, address, city, state, zip, and phone number. This information will be used as headers for specific reports. So I would recommend filling that out. Once you're done, just be sure to click on the Save button up top. So I'd like to just pause briefly just to take any questions that you may have either on the application control screen or General Setup. Now, as I mentioned earlier, because of the small amount of attendees that we have, I didn't need to mute the microphones. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And in fact, I'd just like to allow maybe a couple of minutes, even if you don't have questions, if you'd like to just go ahead and complete those 2 steps. And in fact, while you might be doing that, let me bring up the application control screen. So if you'd like to copy my settings, you can go ahead and do that. If you do, I would just ask you to ignore this bottom section. Okay. Just make sure you don't copy that. That is specific to my test database. Okay, so if there isn't any questions on these two screens, we can go ahead and move on. And so we're going to stick with the administration drop-down menu, but we're going to move over to the List Center category. And within this section, you're going to be able to create master lists of titles and groups that you're going to need later on when you're adding employees into the system. So the first screen we're going to look at under this category is called Setup Titles. Now, everyone in the system must have a title or rank. Now, that title is not going to affect how that person is paid. It's just information that's being posted on the schedule. So I'd like to take a moment just to show you what that would look like once you have your schedule built. So you'll notice here under my department heads shift, I have chief, deputy chief, lieutenant. On my day and night shifts, I have sergeants and officers. So that's what we're looking at. That's what we need to build in this step. Now, each title is going to have a code. That code must be 5 characters or less, and that code is what we're going to use to display that information on the schedule. So everything you're looking at here on my day and my night shifts are the codes. Next, you can have a description. Followed by the sort order. Now, when it comes to sort order, what you're doing is you're defining the hierarchy. So let's take a look at the chief here, Chief John Smith. Of course, the sort order number for the chief is 1. Deputy chief is 2. Captain is 3, and lieutenant is 4. Now, I don't have a captain on my department head shift at the moment, but this is how it knows to place the chief at the top of the list. Using the day shift just above that as an example, the sergeant title has a lower sort number than the officer title. Certain titles might have the same sort order number. In this case, detectives and officers both have a number 6. So to add a new title, click on the New button, enter a code, and for this example, I might do Detective Sergeant. And the sort order, I would use 5 just to match up what I'm currently using for the other sergeants. Now just keep in mind that whatever code you use is going to be what is displayed on the schedule. Now when you enter this screen, you may notice that you already have a list of titles already in here. Now of course you can choose to use those, but there might be some that don't apply to your department. So you can just click on any one of the items that you don't need and click on the delete button up top. And just repeat that until you remove all of the titles that you don't need from the list. Now, one of the last screens we're going to look at today is adding employees. Once we get to that step, you'll see that there's a drop-down menu. As you're entering people, you're going to choose from one of these titles. Okay, so before we close out of this screen, is there any questions about how to enter a title or how a title is used? I would just like to allow a few minutes for you to enter maybe 1 or 2 examples of titles that may have not been on your list. And I'll be on standby if anyone has any questions on doing that. Okay. I'll give that another minute for those of you entering your titles. Okay. Okay. We'll have a little bit more time at the end of this session for you to complete this step, but I think for now we can go ahead and move on. So let's close out of setup titles, and next up we're going to set up our groups. Once again, when you enter the setup group screen, you may see many groups already created for you, which you are free to use, or you can delete them just by clicking on the ones that simply don't apply to your department and clicking on the delete button up top. Now, groups are used to define the departments, or in some cases, squads or platoons within your agency. So normally, your group list should match more or less your organizational chart. You might have an administrative department, maybe a records department. Depending on how you schedule your folks, you might have multiple squads. And so in my department here, which really is modeled after a small police department, I have an admin, a detective bureau, a records division. I have a group for my school resource officer. I have patrol squads and a traffic department. Now, your groupings are important because they control how you will view schedules, as well as how you're able to filter your reports. So let's take a look at some examples as to how we use our groupings. I'm going to minimize this window. And on my schedule view here, which you have not built yet, I'm going to click on the very bottom, my monthly schedule. You'll notice that my monthly schedule is listed based on those groups I just showed you. This, of course, makes it easy for supervisors or managers of a particular department to have access to everyone's schedules, but also focus on their people. Okay. We also use groupings for the weekly schedules. Okay. Now, groups are also used as filtering options for reports. So let's do that. Let's go to our report section. Let's go to our time off category and run a simple activity report. Here, I have the date range that by default was set in our first screen under the application control. Of course, I can always change that either by manually changing the dates or selecting from the drop-down list. Under employees, we're going to click on the button, and over to the far right, you'll notice that there is a group option. So if I just wanted to run an activity report for a particular squad or a particular department, it allows me to choose it. It only shows me those within the group, and then I can either highlight individuals within the group, or I could select everyone under the group. At this point, you can move on and choose what types of time off you want to report on and get your results. Let's exit out of the report section, go back to our setup group screen, and you'll notice that as you're building these, the email destination tab is going to show you 4 options: request emails, approve with STIP, approve emails, and deny emails. Now, this is not something you're going to set up at this moment, but it should inform you on how you want to build your groupings. What we're doing here is we're saying if a member of this particular department or squad requests time off or overtime, the system can send notifications out based on these settings. So, under Squad A, we want to make sure that anyone that requests time off or overtime receives an email notification. Under the request column, we have someone named James Harris. That's the sergeant of Squad A, or the supervisor of Squad A. So that makes sure that they receive the email letting them know that someone within their group submitted a day off or overtime request. That's how they know they have to log on to the system and view the entry and approve it or possibly deny it. Once that supervisor approves that entry, everyone under the approved column would get an email. Okay? So those groupings are going to affect how you can set up those defaults. Now, I will mention that you can override those. So if for some reason I work in one department but I need to send my request to someone else, I will have the opportunity to do that. These are just default email notifications. Now, because you have not entered your employees yet, when you click on this button, you're not going to see a list like you're seeing here. Okay, so that's why you can't complete this step right now. The only thing you can do is under the General tab, click on the New button, enter the code for the department you want to create. And I don't have a narcotics division in here, so I'm going to go ahead and just put that in. 5 characters or less. A description, and then click on the Save button up top to add it to your list. Now, everyone within the system needs to belong to a group. Whether it's a civilian in an admin department, whatever it might be, you're going to have to create a group for them. So at this time, I'd just like to allow a few minutes for any questions that you might have on creating your groups. If you would like to remove some of the groups that you don't need from your list, you can go ahead and delete some of those, add a few, and I would just like to allow a few minutes for that. So I will be on standby, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have while you're trying to complete that step.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Brian McNally here.
Sure.
It doesn't really necessarily pertain directly to groups, but we're trying to get our schedule printed out, and I was just wondering if there's an easy way you can show me real quick how to get our export our schedule here.
Now, are you just looking for like a general printout of the schedule?
Yeah, like we need to provide our court with everybody's monthly schedule so that they can schedule court.
Oh, I see. Um, have have you considered giving them read-only access to the system?
We have, but we're fighting a losing battle with exploring new technologies. So while we're transitioning, we're hoping to try to give them a paper copy for the next few months.
Right. You know, the closest I could come up with is something like printing the monthly schedule. The problem is that it treats it almost like a screenshot.
Okay.
You know, it's
Now, when you go to print, right, in the top right-hand corner on that screen, it'll try to export it as a PDF. So go down and over to the right to the other print. Next one, next bar down. Like come down to the actual screen.
oh, that one right there.
Yeah. But my issue is when I load this report, I'm not getting anybody's info. So it shows it on the monthly schedule on the other screen, but here it's all blank. So, because that's ideal, that'll work for us. I just can't figure out how to get I don't know what I'm missing that I didn't enter correctly.
So you're saying that when you bring this screen up, like for instance here, I have a bunch of A's for like an admin shift. You're saying you're not seeing that?
Yeah, there's nothing there. It's all blank.
What I would take a quick peek at is under administration, under the shift center, under setup shifts. Make sure that there's an abbreviation for each of the shifts.
Okay, so it needs to be different than what's showing on your monthly schedule where it says like PD nights.
Yes, because the monthly schedule is displaying the code up top, but there's going to be several schedule views, both on the web portal and in the report that you're looking at, where it's using the abbreviation because of the limitations in space that it has there.
So that's why the web portal wasn't showing us our monthly schedules then.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. That makes sense. And then I can wait too. I don't want to steal time from John because we're a little bit further ahead. So I have another thing I just want to run past you, but if you want to continue, and then I'll grab you before you're done.
Okay. Okay, so if we don't have any questions on the groups, and there's still an opportunity at the end for that, we can move on to our Employee Center category. We're going to choose Employee Profile, and we're going to begin entering our employees. Now, as you can see over on the left, I already have several employees. I have almost 30 people in my system. Over to the right, you're going to see several tabs that thankfully you don't have to complete all of those. I'm going to point out just the basic ones that you need. Let's click on the New button, and we're going to complete every item in red. So let's enter my new employee. Under the personal details, you're free to use middle initial, date of birth, driver's license. However, our system will not use any of that information for scheduling purposes. Next, you're going to enter a unique code for that employee. For some, that could be a badge number. or some other identification number that we prefer it be a number that the person knows. So a payroll ID probably wouldn't be the best fit, since most of us don't know what our payroll IDs are. Now in my system, I am simply using first initial, last name as the code. Now, if the concern is that you might have too many J. Smiths, well, then you may want to choose something different. And again, maybe a badge number or an employee ID, something that's going to be unique to that individual. Under the group, go ahead and choose where they belong. Select their title. And now on the bottom right, enter their seniority number. Now the seniority number simply sorts that person on the schedule within their rank. In other words, we already know that sergeants are always above officers, lieutenants always above sergeants, but within the rank or the title, we want to list everyone based on that seniority number. So within the group of 3 officers I have on my day shift, Craig Hamilton would be the highest in seniority. Diane Jordan would then be the most junior person working on that shift. Now going back to that seniority number, the lower the number, the higher you are in seniority. Now I currently have 28 employees in my system. That makes David Wallace here 29. Again, that is just sorting that person on the list. It does not determine when that person will be offered overtime, nothing like that. I mean, you can use this information later on as one of the variables used. If you're filling overtime using a call list, you can extract this information, but you don't necessarily have to use it. You can actually set a unique sort order for those types of operations. Now, those are just the required fields. You could save this profile, but I'm going to recommend you just take a look at a few other settings. For instance, up top, you have several checkboxes available. If you have part-time employees, if this was a part-time employee, we would just mark it. If it's a brand new hire, maybe you have someone who's new on the job, they're not going to be able to take part in certain types of work, whether it's overtime, things like that. So you can choose to mark them as on probation, so you can block them from taking part in that. If they are a civilian employee, you can go ahead and mark that checkbox. Exempt employees are employees that cannot earn overtime. If you're going to be swiping in and out through one of our kiosk systems, you might have certain employees that have to swipe in and certain ones that don't. If the person you're entering is a manager or supervisor of some sort, you can choose department head. We also have a crossing guard checkbox for any of you who might be using this system for scheduling those folks. And finally, we have pay shift diff. So for those that do pay shift differential, if that person is eligible to earn it, depending on the type of schedule they work, go ahead and check that box. Now, for the most part, a lot of these are just information that we're grabbing so that later on, if we need to treat people differently, if we need to process payroll for one group of people differently from another, it allows us to separate based on these values. Now, if there's any question as to whether or not you can mark the checkbox, leave it blank. For those of you that plan on processing payroll through our system, if we have to come back and mark these because it's going to assist us in developing some sort of a payroll interface for you, we can always go back and make those changes later. Now, a few other fields that are not required but could be useful are found here: hire date and accrual date. Hire date is when the employee began working for your agency. Accrual date is what the system is using to calculate things like time off allotments. So for many of you, you do this based on years of service. From years 1 through 5, you get a certain amount of vacation time. From 6 through 10, you get maybe a bump. You're going to have the opportunity of entering those rules in there so that the system can automatically apply time off into everyone's banks. The system will always use accrual date. So for most of your personnel, your hire date and accrual date should match. If, however, you have someone that maybe worked for another department or another agency, maybe within the county or whatever it might be, they might get credit for those years of service in that other agency when it comes time to calculate how much time off they're accruing. So even though David here may have started working for us on September 1st, 2016, he may have come from another agency where he started working in 2014. So for the purposes of calculating his time off accruals, we may be using this date. Okay. Now, I'm not going to click on the Save button just yet. We're going to click on the Contact Information tab up top. And here you can enter contact information and emergency contact information at the very bottom. Those are not required fields, of course. What we would recommend, though, is entering phone numbers. Now, phone numbers can be used when you generate a call list to fill a staffing shortage. We're going to put in email addresses, so when this person requests time off or overtime or when their schedule gets moved around, we can always send an email. And under text message address, enter their mobile number using the MMS format for text messaging. Here's an example of, I believe, what Verizon uses. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about this. Our system has the capability of sending out text messages to fill overtime. So if we identify a staffing shortage on a particular day, we can notify the people who are eligible to work via text message. The text message they receive will include a link that will allow them to accept or decline the overtime opportunity you're giving them. Because of the amount of information that we sometimes need to provide on that text message, such as the date, the shift, and the hours that we need coverage for, we would want the text message address to be entered using the MMS format of those text addresses. So You may need to obtain that information directly from your employees unless you want to look up, the format used for Verizon, the format used for AT&T, the format used for T-Mobile. I believe the standard text format for Verizon is something like vText. Okay. So that's for basic text messaging. That's what they would call the SMS format. MMS is what is used for multimedia. So whenever you send someone a picture or a video in a text message, this is actually what the carrier is using. They're using another type of address format. Now, for those of you that are not interested in sending out the text message alerts for overtime, you can leave this blank. That's fine. Okay. Now, I would also mention that you can add additional phone numbers. So in the event that you are going to be using a call list to fill overtime, you may want to provide the person making the calls with as many phone numbers as you possibly can. Okay, so let's click on the Save button up top, and now our new hire, the new employee, is listed on the left side. Okay, we have one last screen. It's actually tied to this one in some respects. So we're going to close out of the employee profile screen, and we're going to move on to pay info. Let's find our new employee here on the left. And over on the right, we're just worried about a handful of fields. If you happen to know the payroll ID for that employee, enter it under the payroll ID field. Under standard hours scheduled per pay period, my guy here might not necessarily work 80 hours every 2 weeks, but his pay is calculated based on 80, so I'll leave that set to the default. Those with unpaid lunch might see maybe 75 or 70 hours in that field. Now, this information will be used in the next couple of steps to calculate their hourly rate of pay. So you'll see that in a moment. But before we do that, under minutes of unpaid lunch, if that person does in fact get unpaid lunch, enter it in units of minutes. So maybe this person is scheduled on an 8-hour shift, but they're really only paid for 7.5 hours. You'll want to see a 30 in there. So we might see 30 or 60, depending on the employee. Now, those are the only 3 fields you're going to need at this time. Let's move on to the Pay Rates tab. And we're going to enter the annual salary for our employee. Now, as you key in the amount under the annual field, you'll notice that the rest of the fields auto-calculate based on whatever number you had in that field. Now, salary information is only used for internal reports. It is not used for payroll purposes because your payroll system is the system of record when it comes to that kind of information. This, however, will allow you to run reports to see how much money you're spending on overtime under a particular department or for a particular reason. After you've entered the annual rate, select the effective date and add that to the salary history. Moving forward, this is the same screen you would go in when the salaries get increased. So you enter the new amount, enter the effective date for that increase, and add that to the salary history. The final tab up top will keep a summary of that salary history for you. Once we're done, let's click on the Save button up top. Now, for many of you, entering the employees might be what takes the most amount of time data entry-wise, depending on the amount of people you have. As long as you have your employees entered into the system before your 5th online class, you're in good shape. So for your online class number 2, 3, and 4, we're not going to look at employees again. For class number 2, the next one, we're going to learn how to create job assignments. We're going to learn how to create the day off and overtime reason codes, vacation, sick, personal, things of that nature. And in class number 3, we're going to learn how to create the actual schedules, the shifts that people will eventually be assigned to, and the schedule patterns that they work. So you have a decent window of time in order to be able to complete entering all of your employee profiles. So that's the last screen that we had to cover for today. We have just under 20 minutes left for any questions that you may have. So are there any questions on adding an employee or entering the pay info that we just looked at?
I'm all set if Brian wants to ask his other questions, and thanks a lot, Brian.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. So, this is Josh, right?
No, it's Francisco.
Oh, sorry, Francisco. Usually
no, that's okay.
I apologize. So, we were trying to get our schedule squared away this morning, and I know we're a little off topic here. I couldn't find a help out that's anytime soon, and so where we're at is we're trying to print this schedule this morning, and I don't know what we did, and I think we half deleted our schedule for the month of September. So I was just wondering if it's possible if you could take a look and see if there's a quick fix to undo what we did. We're good for the month of October and August. We were in the web portal under build schedule, I believe, and trying to basically run a report, and I think we moved all the employees off their rotations. But I just didn't know if there's something overriding it that, there's a way to easily fix what we did.
Yeah, no, you guys haven't gone, have you gone live yet? No.
We're live in a beta field, basically. Our guys are using it to use their schedules and submit for time off right now, just to get it rolled out. So we've been in a transition period due to administrative changes over the last 3 months. So this kind of got started and then it got dropped, and now it's back up and running, and the town kind of wants it up as quickly as possible. So we're kind of behind the ball here.
Okay. Well, Brian, do you have the program loaded up on the desktop computer?
It's up right now. So I don't know if you want to